Hey guys, it's Justin at the Suave Review, and welcome to the fourth part in my look at the Hannibal Lecter movies. Today we're taking a look at Red Dragon, which is the third one to star Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal, and is a prequel to Silence of the Lambs. Just a brief history, if you didn't see my Manhunter video, Red Dragon, the novel, was written before Silence of the Lambs, and was made into Manhunter, which has no relation to the Hopkins movies. So after Hannibal, they decided to adapt the first book, which they didn't do with Anthony Hopkins. It's not a remake of Manhunter. Just saying, some people call it a remake. It's not a remake, it's another adaptation of the book. Kind of like the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, where it's not really a remake of the classic, it's just a different version of the story. So, if you haven't seen my Manhunter video, I guess I'll just give a brief description of the plot. The plot involves FBI agent Will Graham, who he's a retired FBI agent, and he's really good at solving these crimes and getting into the criminals' head and thinking like them. He put away Hannibal Lecter, which is how the movie opens, with him confronting Hannibal and finding out that he was the killer. And now there's a killer named the Tooth Fairy who's going around killing people, and the FBI is having a hard time finding him. So they get Will Graham to come out of retirement and help them track him down. And in the process, he gets help from Hannibal Lecter. At some point, it's kind of like Silence of the Lambs. And that's the basic gist. So, to start off, I like this movie better than Manhunter. I think it's a much better film. I mean, not much better, by a little bit. It's paced a little bit better. Things are more developed. I still say the biggest flaw in this movie compared to Manhunter, and to me is the biggest flaw in this whole movie, is the casting of Edward Norton as Will Graham. I like him as an actor. Yeah, Edward Norton's an awesome actor, but I don't know if it was him or the way the part was written. He just doesn't fit this part. You don't believe that he's been through all this stuff. He seems too calm and just regular. Whereas in Manhunter and in the new Hannibal TV show, you could tell that Will Graham is not the straightest kind of person. You can tell that he might be going insane. If you don't know if he is or not, but he might be. So you don't get any of that with him. Here's just kind of the straight guy, the straight arrow. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I can catch him easily because I think like him. Nothing's wrong. But that's not the character, and it doesn't work as much. The whole scene where he figures out that the killer took off his gloves and touched the victim is done in just a way he just figures out and then you took off your gloves, he's thinking it, and it doesn't work as well. It's not as good as in Manhunter, especially in Manhunter, but that's the biggest flaw of this movie, I say. But the rest of the movie is a really fun, thrilling crime drama. The rest of the actors are good. Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal, he's still kind of cheesy, but he's not as bad as Hannibal. He's nowhere near as cheesy as that, and he's good in this part. The only problem is the fact that he's aged, and it's really distracting thinking this movie takes place before Silence of the Lambs, and you see him in the jumpsuit from Silence. And you can tell he's a bit bigger and wrinkly, and it's a little distracting, I'll be honest with you. I do find that distracting, but you kind of get used to it as the movie goes on. Just when you first see him like that, you're kind of oh, that just doesn't match. Harvey Keitel plays Jack Crawford, the character from Silence of the Lambs. He does pretty good, nothing too special, but as the Tooth Fairy, you have Ralph Fiennes, who, he's not as intimidating as the one in Manhunter. He's not Manhunter, he was creepy and he was unpredictable. He didn't really you felt that there's something kind of weird there. And him, he's not like that, but he's still not bad. He gives a pretty good performance. I enjoyed it. He wasn't as good as he could have been. The movie is directed by Brett Ratner, who sounds like such a weird choice, because, for you don't know, he's the director of the Rush Hour movies and X-Men The Last Stand. and it's just it feels weird that you're going from. Think about the other Hannibal movies. You have Michael Mann, Jonathan Demme, and Ridley Scott, and then you get Brett Ratner. He just seems like a random choice, and he did an adequate job. He's just passable, nothing too special. That's also the thing about this movie. It doesn't have much of a style to it. Silence had the whole gritty, realistic, unsettling style. Hannibal has the operatic kind of, artsy, not artsy, but kind of style. And then Red Dragon kind of just has the regular movie. There's no real style to it, and I thought that was kind of lacking. There's some good imagery, like with the killer and the killer Tooth Fairy where he lives and stuff like that. There's some good imagery, some good stuff like that, but there's no really distinct style to it. And I feel that's a little off compared to the previous two films, definitely, compared to that. But what I do like, especially in comparison to Manhunter, the whole story about the Tooth Fairy meeting the blind lady and them kind of becoming friends and stuff like that, that is fleshed out and actually developed. And Manhunter, it was just too rushed, came too last minute near the end of the movie. And here it's fleshed out. It makes sense. The Tooth Fairy's character is much more fleshed out. And I like that. I think that was much more interesting. And because he wasn't as fleshed out in Manhunter. But overall, it's not a whole lot to this. It's a really fun and intriguing crime drama. Not as good as Silence. It doesn't stick with you as much. It's not as disturbing at times. The movie's actually pretty tame when it comes to violence. It's actually not. It doesn't go over the top like Hannibal. One scene that I particularly liked is the opening where Will Graham captures Hannibal, and I thought that was actually a really cool scene. It wasn't in Manhunter, and I'm not sure if it was in the actual Red Dragon novel, but it was a really cool scene where Graham goes to Hannibal's house and starts telling him some stuff, and then Hannibal walks away and he starts looking at his books, and Graham realizes that Hannibal is the killer that they've been looking for the whole time. Really cool scene, really great confrontation between the two. It was a little ridiculous how the scene ended with Hannibal getting stabbed by 3 arrows and then shot twice. I thought it was a little over the top, but besides that, I thought that was a really cool scene. Great way to open the movie because it just starts out like that, and already the opening you're intrigued and you want to see how the rest of the movie paves away. And that's what's cool is how it's different than Clarice Starling is that Will Graham is the guy who captured Hannibal. He's an actual match for Hannibal, so it's interesting to see them confront each other and talk instead of just Clarice who's always just startled at what he's saying and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool. There's some good suspense moments too, which I like. Which there was none of that in Hannibal. So it goes along at a nice pace. It doesn't get too slow, but it never goes too. It goes a little fast at some points, but it never goes too fast. And it was fun seeing Hannibal back in the supporting role, because he's in this a little bit. I don't know if it's less or more than Silence, maybe around the same ish. Which they did add in more scenes with him because he's a more famous character. In the book, he's only in a few scenes, in the Manhunter film. So he gets more screen time, and those scenes are fun to watch because it's just fun to see Anthony Hopkins as the part. So it's nice to see that character condensed and not as big, because I still say whenever Hannibal's a main character, it always kind of, whenever he's really main and appears in a lot of stuff, it kind of brings the movie down a little bit, which we'll easily get into in the next review. But yeah, that's Red Dragon. Out of 10, I would give it a little bit higher than Manhunter, 8.5. And I say it's worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of Silence of the Lambs. It's a good kind of companion film to Silence, where it's not directly related because there's no Clarice Starling, and the guy who runs the mental hospital actually comes back and stuff like that. But besides that, it's not completely connected to Silence of the Lambs as much, so it makes it kind of a good companion film. So if you really like Silence of the Lambs, check out Red Dragon. You can skip Hannibal. You can check out Hannibal if you really need to, but Red Dragon is really great. It's not great, but really good movie. And yeah, so that ends the Anthony Hopkins movies. This was the last time he played the character. Next this Red Dragon is a prequel to Silence. And it gets even more confusing because our next one is going to be a prequel to this prequel. That is the not disappointing, just really bad Hannibal Rising. But we'll get to that when the time comes. But until then, talk to you guys later.